I'm very inspired with what I have chosen to read today. As I said, I don't want it just to be a reading from this. I would love it to open to some sharing of our inner perception. One thing I love about satsang is that nothing is to be just accepted as a belief or a faith or anything of that sort, that it really is a peeling back of what we have taken for granted, or a perception through which we have been delivered a kind of sense of reality through the senses, which is predominantly how we know ourselves. We have made a lot of assumptions, and the consequence of these assumptions is that we are left with a lot of questions still. So if this reality that the senses perceive, that I am a subject, separate from and in relation to all these objects being people and things and experiences, if this basic sense of how we live as a person in the world, meaning as a subject in relation to these objects, that is the assumption based on division. And of course, there is no problem with that, other than we are, those of us who are lucky enough to recognize it, we are left with a lot of confusion as to the purpose of this so-called reality. Is it for the purpose to feel alienated or being a separate someone in relation to all these other separate someones and some things and some experiences? Is the experience for the purpose to feel incomplete? Constantly chasing the other to get something, to maybe sometimes at best temporarily get something, only to feel it's a lot of work to try and keep that which you think that you have attained. And that's a kind of struggle. So the people who are interested to come to satsang are those who have these questions. Is the purpose of my life to struggle? Because if we live by the assumed reality through the senses and the sense-making mind that has collected all this sensory impression to put together a me, a separate little me in a big, big, wide world with a lot of other separate me's and separate things like trees and rivers and skies and forests and fires, and it's a very insecure experience when we find ourselves as a little separate something, because we have to protect ourselves against the other. And some people have been able to perceive something beyond what the senses present themselves in the way I described, through sense of separation, division, that there has been a way that one can open to see something which is not bound in that appearance. And they start talking about that, and they say, actually, the reality is not what appears. And therefore, when you see that it's not what it appears, there's a possibility that you don't have to suffer. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to feel insufficient or small or insecure. That definitely enlivens my interest. Well, I'm interested in that. I'm interested not to feel a constant sense that I have to get more, do more, be more, want more, and want others to be more. That's a big part of it. I would be fine if everyone else would just step up. It's a kind of way that we often see our reality. What's wrong with everyone else? That they find something wrong with me. So this is what we have seen in our lives. I'm sure these questions are not new to all of you. It is because of these questions and because of this line of inquiry that we have come to satsang. And what is beautiful about satsang is we start to turn our attention to those who have been able to speak, and including those who are in the room, of a potentiality and direct realization of something beyond just the sensual, mental, intellectual, egoic reality of separation. And that's why I like to, in this particular satsang, I love to read from that enlightened vision. It also helps me in the unfoldment of my own enlightened vision that matures. The more I read this and the more I meditate upon this, that enlightened vision, which means the vision that is not bound in the so-called reality, or the fleeting reality, or the temporary reality of separation. And something starts to ease inside. This is from one of the yogic texts called Patanjali Yog Darshan. I love the subtitle on this, or the subheading, An Ancient Guide to Enlightenment. Yes, please, John.
I was going to say, it's not interesting. You're reading from a book or from a scripture that says that it's thousands of years old. And isn't it interesting that it's perhaps the only subject that we can talk about the same way 3,000 years ago as today?
Isn't that amazing?
Any other subject?
Yes.
No science subject. There's no science of the body or the mind that we talk about.
No.
But the science of what you're talking about. It's the same subject.
Isn't that amazing?
As 3,000 years ago.
Amazing, eh?
It
It does. Because what is true has to be that which is always true. Higher awareness is the seer of thoughts and forms. Now, there's a certain point where you just have to reserve your interference with your judgment mechanisms. Just put everything aside for a moment. Give it enough space with these concepts, and they are concepts. Allow the concepts to have some space around them without your interference immediately. You can interfere later, but immediately not trying to interfere. Well, is that right or is it wrong? Do I agree? Do I not agree? How do I know? How do I know it's true? These kind of questions, which are not wrong in any way, they're fine. But can we just put them on reserve for a moment? Because these are really big concepts. The concept of the seer. It deserves a little time and a little space around it to go deeper with it. I mean, this is not a word that we use in our common parlance, the seer. I just invite you just to be conscious of the interference of the intellect, which tends to only want to know what is familiar. The seer. So this word is being used to ignite or awaken a higher awareness. So rather than the seeing being relating with thoughts and forms, so whether it's the physical eyes or the inner seeing of perception, we are all familiar with the things that we see and the thoughts that we perceive, the ideas that we perceive, but are we aware of, and here it's described as higher because it takes, as I said, it's not the given, it's something one has to open to. I am the seer. What is this power that gives light to seeing something, perceiving something? But in the process of perception, the seer loses sight of its nature as the observer because it gets mixed with what it's seen. So in the process of perception, which means in the process of thinking and sensing, the seer loses sight of its nature as the observer because it gets mixed with what it sees and adopts the identity of that which it observes. So if I see a car driving up the driveway, of course, my attention is going to go on who's in the car. What do they want? Have they come for satsang, or have they come to deliver a parcel? Or have they got a wrong address? Now, it's not that we can stop this process. And there's a place for that process, of course, that will continue. We don't leave that behind. But this is now the inquiry when we're not having to respond to who's in the car and what is the purpose of their being in the car. Are they a threat or are they a friend? Do I need to defend myself or can I relax? Now, as we sit here, we're not having to attend anything that is seen. And even you'll notice some of you have naturally started to close your eyes because you're wanting to access what here is described as the seer. So in this mixture, one has adopted the identity of what is seen. And of course, I would add, and all that which accompanies it, as I said. Do I need to run? Do I need to hide? Do I need to go and get my wallet? Is it someone wanting some money? There's some response here. Do I have to do something? The seer's nature of being an independent observer gets lost in identification with thought and physical objects, and so appears to change along with them. All that is seen and all that is perceived is described as being in the field of change. Now it appears I change with what I perceive. So I perceive someone coming, delivering great news. I become happy. Even I am going to feel myself fortunate, maybe. Let's say it's a really great gift that they're coming to give me. So then now I'm fortunate. The I has become something fulfilled or fortunate by what happened in the field of change. And if it was the opposite, someone coming to tell me bad news, now I become unfortunate. So the difference is the experience can be fortunate or unfortunate, but why have we assumed that I has become something fortunate or unfortunate? This aphorism further describes the state of union, saying that when it takes place, the seer, also described as self, the seer self is with its true nature. That's a big statement. We're going to go more into that. What I am describing in describing the seer is describing a state of union, saying it takes place. This union is revealed, and the seer self is with its true nature. Why would this be defined as our true nature? Because that which is true does not change. And that's why it's interesting. John brought that observation about the scripture being relevant today as it was 3,000 years ago, because it is the study of that which does not change. Here described as the seer, so that we can access that. That which is true does not change. Yes, that's what I was going to say. It needs more explanation. It's not enough just to say that. In Advait Vedanta, in this knowledge, wisdom, it's not enough just to say self is unchanging. Of course, the question is going to become, how do I know that? How do I not only wait for my death to know that with a promise that I can't really trust? How can I know it now, incarnated in this body, with senses, with a thinking mind, with people driving up my driveway wanting something or wanting to give me something? How can I know this, that the seer is unchanging? So it doesn't just give you ultimatums like this. So now it goes into the description of these big statements. That which is true does not change. And what it is describing as true is the seer self. The consciousness that has a thought is not the thought and does not change because of a thought. Now this becomes a kind of formula I rest on all the time. This becomes a way that we can start training our mind to think in a certain way that I have found hugely beneficial in my life, in enriching my sense of being here on earth and with people, and how I am with myself. How I have been able to transform from not particularly liking the relationship with myself and with others to feeling not only loving it, but feeling immensely grateful and in love with life, is resting upon this formula that did, yes, start as a kind of formula that I applied and watched the result. The consciousness that has a thought is not the thought and does not change because of a thought. I think we can all now look at this. It does not require belief, does not require faith. It's not that far from what we know. We even use the word had. I had a thought. When I say I feel, a feeling is a kind of thought or a kind of experience. Even though we mix now with feeling, I with the feeling, I am happy, because that happiness always is in the field of change, we still use the same pronoun, I am sad. Has the I really become happy? Because if the I became happy, why did it then become sad? So we just start to examine this a little. I is experiencing an emotion. I is perceiving a thought. I is able to see through these senses all these forms. I is the same. I perceive through the senses. I perceive a thought, which means I think, and I feel. All using the same word, I. Has I become the thought? Because if it has become the thought, how does it then change to suddenly become a feeling? How does the I suddenly change then? What, it jumps out of thinking and becomes a sensory perception? Cannot. These yogis, they were described back in the ancient days as scientists. They were the first scientists. That's what's incredible. It had nothing to do with religion, this wisdom tradition. Nothing to do with religion at all. Somehow it became associated with that, merging of that, maybe a tendency of human beings to glorify everything, tell stories around things. If there's not a direct perception of something, it's a story around something. But just that simple idea that I had a thought, I had a feeling, I observed action, I observed a sensory perception. And to start to question, inquire into what is this I, that is the very crux of what is satsang. Welcome to satsang. This ongoing, ever deepening inquiry into what is that conscious I. You cannot say the I is a thing. It's not matter. You can't feel it, taste it, touch it, measure it, weigh it, which means you cannot weigh or measure yourself. Yet don't we measure ourselves all the time? I'm great, I'm small, I'm doing well, I'm not doing well. Oh, I thought I was great, but now this other person has come along, and are they better? Because we measured ourselves according to these bodies, according to our experiences, according to our identification. Amazing, eh? The consciousness that has a thought is not the thought and does not change because of a thought. This needs a lot of weight to sit with this. It's not something just, oh yeah, got that, move on, next. The unchanging level of consciousness is the true identity of self, or the true nature of the seer. The true nature of self is in contrast with the fleeting, changing nature that self develops when incorrectly identifies as thought and form. It says the word incorrectly here because it's incorrect in terms of bringing the fulfillment that we seek. It's not incorrect in truth. It's perfect also. The identification with form, the identification with me as a person is not incorrect. It's also perfect and has its place. It's only described incorrect, meaning that is not the totality of me. It is only the partial experience that I can have of me. Thus, when union with inner self takes place, the seer discovers its true identity, which does not change. Union with the inner self. Why is all this important? Comes in the next sentence. Why is it important to turn our attention towards what is described here as the seer? You could say, well, I don't see the purpose of this. Like, why am I enduring this talk? Why am I sitting in this chair? I could be playing golf. I could be making Afghans and drinking coffee. I would even find that difficult to resist of a satsang. The next little part is the why. We suffer due to change. Emotional suffering takes place because we develop attachment to people and situations and give a sense of love, support, strength, and confidence, etc. When these people or situations change and therefore no longer provide us with love, support, strength, and confidence, the resultant feelings that we experience are pain, anguish, grief, and suffering. We invest all that love, support, strength, confidence, etc. We could make that list longer. We invest it in all those things that change. You may live with someone your whole life. Well, not your whole life, unless you live with your mother your whole life. And then eventually one of you is going to go and one of you is going to experience change. But generally we live with our friends or our partners a portion of our lives. At a certain point, that is going to change, not only ultimately change in the terms of death, but even within ourselves, as we are together, we experience a lot of change. If you met someone when you were 20, the reason why you got together when you were 20 might not be the reason you're still together at 40, 60. That changes. Very often it does. And what endures is the kind of higher state that can see the self that endures independently from that change that is the change of the more surface level person. To see something deeper in each other and in the pursuits that we undertake, to see that deeper aspect, it frees up so much struggle that you don't have to engage with all the pain that comes with trying to make the changing aspect, trying to make it the unchanging. Suffering comes when we try to make that which changes the unchanging, which means the stable one. The thing that's going to give us stability, love, security, confidence, identity. That's pain. Trying to make yourself secure or loved or give your life purpose through attaching to someone or something or some experience or some status or some idea, some story, some ideology that is of the changing nature results in pain, results in dissatisfaction, let's say, a softer way to say pain. Because when these peoples and situations change, they can no longer provide us with the love, support, strength, and confidence. The resulting feeling is that we experience is pain, anguish, grief, and suffering. So this is the why. Why are we studying this? Why are we turning our attention to be open to the potentiality of knowing yourself as the free, independent, unchanging seer self? Because we don't want to suffer. We see now where suffering comes from, the attachment to the identification with change, with things that change. When we assign blame for our suffering, we feel anger towards the person or situation or persons and situations to which we have assigned that blame. I think we often see, well, you really see it in teenagers. As soon as their desire is thwarted in some way, they just project to the mum, usually, or to the dad. You are binding me. Mums and dads take on a lot of projection of anger because it goes with blame. Now, a teenage mentality can persist in the adult life. We know that, don't we, Rodrigo? People assigning blame as a way to vent their anger. Maybe we just get a bit more sophisticated. We've grown up a little bit from the parents, but we're throwing it either on our partner or our neighbor or our government or our systems, or maybe if you're really crazy on the weather, oh, blasted weather, and you go out and you shake your fist. Or maybe some annoying children in the neighborhood that are coming over and playing in your garden. She said there's no shortage of recipients. That's true. Perfect. Always brilliantly said. Lovely. When we assign blame for our suffering, we can feel anger towards the person or situation, or persons and situations to which we have assigned the blames. As Patricia said, no shortage of the assignees. Is there such a word? Attachment to that which changes will ultimately lead to some degree of disappointment or grief or suffering. How to get out? Now, we've painted this picture. Our inner nature, which does not change, does not allow us to be comfortable with this condition. This is a brilliant statement. Why don't we accept pain? Why don't we say, well, life sucks, suck it up? I love this. Our inner nature, which does not change, and I would say, which is the nature of the seer, peaceful, blissful, content, enriched, inspired, wise, compassionate. I added all those words. It's not in the script. It just says our inner nature, which does not change, does not allow us to be comfortable with this condition of suffering. Something is stirring. Something is driving us to get out of pain. And lucky are we who have now turned our attention to a way of understanding our pain with the potentiality of coming out of it. Everyone has an inner sense that emotional stability and objectivity is possible, but it is not achieved when one is identified with the changes and is not in touch with their inner self. When there is no anchor, we end up helplessly riding the tides of change. And the word here is helplessly. When life is good, I feel good. When life turns a little bit to the sour, I feel bad. You place your life in the hands of the changing whims of everything that is around you. Is that the position of strength, fulfillment, contentment, wisdom? Can you be an inspiration for someone else if you yourself are just like a little cork on the top of the ocean, feeling this aimless direction in your life or purpose in your life? Connection with and established in our true nature, the seer, is the key to true happiness, for it is true independence and freedom. I love this, that happiness is described as independence or freedom. Independence from suffering is happiness. It's not the happiness that is the high, the happiness that is of change. It is not the happiness of sensual gratification. It is not the happiness that is of ego gratification. I made it. I am it. Until someone comes and said, well, actually, you're not really it at all. Trying to steer your boat that you only can get reflections of others to say, yes, you're it. Yes, you're it. So hopefully I've been able to paint a picture. And just to go back to that one sentence that I said will be our lead into meditation. Union with our inner self. What does this mean? Where the seer discovers its true identity, the unchanging. Let's make a little experiment here. Because it's not enough just to abstractly think of it. We'll just take 7 minutes, and then I would love to hear from all of you for the remaining time. Close your eyes. Many of you have had your eyes closed while listening to the satsang. Simply observing thinking. That's what's happening now. You're not trying to get rid of thoughts, suppress thoughts, or do anything with what you think. You're going to observe the changing nature of thoughts as the unchanging seer. And you're going to bring, by way of contemplation, I am, or simply even I, is the unchanging seer. Let that resonate or reverberate in your mind. I am the unchanging seer. Thoughts arise, and this itself is a thought, but you are observing. You are perceiving. And the power of perception is described as seer. Do not try and find any form of yourself as seer. Just practice for 7 minutes. I am the unchanging seer. I am the ever-present seer. You don't have to keep repeating it as a thought, but we are using it as a direction to a deep investigation. We are testing the hypothesis. Thoughts as a wavering tendency of the field of change. I am the seer. We cannot perceive the seer as an object, because then it would be in the field of change. The seer is who you are, or described in this text, it is your true nature. True being described unchanging. I am the seer self. Thoughts are perceived by me, the seer self. There is no form of me as seer self, but I can see my own form now with eyes closed, images of a body me. But the seer self has no limitation of skin or concept, no limitation of ideas. I am the seer self, not only unchanging, unlimited. Let there be a pause, as if you have, with this question, or rather with this statement, I am ever present, free self. as if you have struck a bell. Let the resonance of that statement, like the sound of striking a gong, let it just be there. Just observe this. When we get distracted in thinking again, strike that gong again. I am the ever free, pure self. Don't think it, be with it. Be with yourself. I am the ever-present and free Seer Self. I am the ever-present Seer Self. Release into it. I am the ever-present Seer Self. Thoughts will arise. They weave in and out of this centermost power. I am the ever-present Seer Self. The thought does not make the Seer Self into anything. So Seer Self that you are remains pure. I am the Seer Self, pure, free, ever present. Just take 3 more minutes to be with yourself. Only requirement, keep your eyes closed.